From the hills of Khe Sanh to the shores of Da Nang, from the Dak To Valley to the Iron Triangle, from the Mekong Delta to the DMZ. Vietnam adds to America's military roll call. Bardstown, Kentucky, small town America. The people recall how Vietnam reached into their town.
I guess you might say that probably most of us didn't want to go. We realized that we had to, and we'd been taking the government's money as a reserve unit, and it was time for us to do our thing. We were asked to go, so we went based on that. I don't think anybody wants to go to war.
Well, I was shaken up, no question about that, but I felt that it was right, it was the thing to do, and I was in that unit, and I was willing to do my part.
No qualms. I thought we were, and I think I'm speaking with the majority of the people in our community that felt that we were doing the right thing.
You got some heroes, I'm sure, that, looking for medals and this kind of stuff, but we weren't that kind of people.
This is the heartland of America, where history is made and judged. It is the second oldest town in Kentucky, population 5,800. 9 churches, 3 factories, 1 art gallery. Bardstown is Bourbon, and the inspiration of the song, My Old Kentucky Home.
I really don't think it was worth what we lost. I don't think it was worth the men that we lost over there, the number of men we lost. I don't think it was worth the money that was poured into the country. I don't think any way, shape, or form it was worth anything to the United States government for what went on and what was lost. And
I don't want to say that my buddies' lives are wasted. We were asked to do a job, and we attempted to do that job. Now, I don't agree with the way we went about it.
And he kept telling me, "Don't cry, Mama, I'll be back." But when I look back, the last look, I could see tears running down his eyes. But he was a good soldier, and he believed in it.
He was scared. I think he was really scared that something might happen.
Bardstown men join a National Guard artillery battery. Its 500 men are called to active duty May 1968. 100 go to Vietnam. Several stay together, assigned to Fire Base Tomahawk north of Da Nang. They fire artillery support for the infantry. They write home about the boredom of battlefield life, but they're together and have been since childhood. Being from the same town seems like a good idea. They serve 7 months on a hilltop. June 1969. A sudden night assault causes heavy casualties at Firebase Tomahawk. Some Bardstown men miss the attack. Their relatives get confusing reports.
But they really wanted to know exactly what did happen because they'd heard so many things, and they wanted to talk with someone who had firsthand knowledge. And of course, several of the other men had better knowledge about it than I did because I wasn't there until we could fly in the next morning.
4 Bardstown sons die on one day. The community tries to understand.
one of the fellows, the father asked me, where was he? You know, do you know exactly what happened? Do you know how he was killed? And this type of thing. And really, I couldn't answer those questions because I wasn't really at that part of that end of the hill at the time it had happened. So I couldn't really give him a straight answer.
I got one letter that's telling me that he was standing guard, watch over his men. He saw the Vietnams coming, and when he turned and ran to tell them to get in the foxhole, he was hit by a grenade.
In all, 15 Bardstown men die in Vietnam. Where? How? Why? Was there meaning? Relatives reach for those last moments so far away.
One will tell you one thing and another will tell you another one. You never really know what I never really found out what happened. I've been told some things, but knowing what really happened, I didn't.
The town was shook. There's no question about it. There was not only families that were involved, but just people in general.
You just almost couldn't believe it. You know, it's just something like that just don't happen, but it happens.
And those who directed the war, the policymakers, generals, and ambassadors, all come to ask, what went wrong in Vietnam?
Well, the first thing about Vietnam is that the campaign, the military, the U.S., the American effort in Vietnam was undertaken without adequate planning.
You couldn't say that we were saving the world from Ho Chi Minh. No one in their senses expected that if Ho Chi Minh won in Vietnam, that next week his legions would appear on Malibu Beach.
The American military establishment and our political leaders not only could not deliver that swift military victory, but could not even define what that victory was.
What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! You want it? Talk up! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now!
We did not take steps to whip up war feeling among the American people. For example, we didn't parade military units through our cities. We didn't send pretty movie stars out to factories to sell bonds. All those things that were done during World War II. And one reason we did not was that we thought that in a nuclear world, it's too dangerous for an entire people to become too angry. Now, this creates a problem because we were trying to do in cold blood what we were asking our men on the battlefield to do in hot blood.
You know, they tried to make the war, the higher-ups did, so that they could play the war as long as they could with this little bit of friction from back home, from the mothers back home. Play the war as a nice war. I mean, they gave people R&Rs. They did everything in Vietnam with the Vietnam War, but try to win the damn thing.
Had the United States determined that the outcome of events in South Vietnam at that time were of vital interest to the United States, that then we should have been prepared to, and indeed, we should have dedicated the full range of our national power to bring about a successful outcome.
We had as fine a military force as America has ever assembled. A force that could have brought the war to an end if it hadn't been for political decisions that prohibited that.
I think the leadership of some future day will have to consider whether maximum force must not be used at the very beginning. One could make an argument now that, as far as Vietnam was concerned, that when President Kennedy decided to make a fight for Vietnam and not for Laos, that he should have put in 100,000 troops immediately, put in a stack of blue chips straight away in order to try to make it clear to the people in Hanoi that we were going to take this very seriously.
America sent 500,000 troops. The military wanted 200,000 more.
And of course, if we'd chosen to use it all and to use our full power, we could have absolutely demolished it. As General May said, we could have bombed them back to the Stone Age.
The notion that some more incremental aid, $750 million more, or 200,000 more troops would have turned it around, I think is preposterous.
Frankly, I think the the loss of the war really stemmed from the fact that the Americans had misinterpreted the nature of the war for so many years, sent 550,000 American soldiers over there to fight the war, which really was not the right reaction to what was the nature of the war. Then we became impatient when the soldiers weren't able to find the enemy and eliminate the threat.
Damn snapper out there. Drop back about 5 meters. 5 meters.
You read about wars, you hear about wars, and some people are killed and wounded in wars, but you never think it's going to be you.
We ended up shooting at monkeys one night. We were so scared.
Scared. I didn't think in terms of that much of really if I was going to be able to come back home, or if I came back home, I'd be in one piece.
But because of the flames, I was panicked. And I was screaming, and I was trying to climb and scale this cliff, and I kept slipping back into the flames, and they were all over me.
It's monotonous. It's monotony punctuated by moments of sheer terror. It was a hit and miss. It was like hunting a hummingbird. You'd go to one village, nothing there, another village, nothing there, and the enemy, the hunting hummingbird we were after, was just buzzing around. No knowledge of what the enemy was after. No knowledge of what I was after as a soldier, what my purpose was. You secure a village, you search it, and you leave, and the village reverts to the enemy. It seemed a senseless strategy, and yet I thought perhaps there's some rhyme or reason behind it. I never found out. To this day, I haven't found out.
The Vietnam War begins to lose popular support in the United States in 1968, the same year Bardstown sends its men.
I said that the opposition to the war would begin to develop when they were sending bodies back, not to Louisville, Kentucky, and Memphis, and New York, where, nobody in the next block knows that somebody's dead, or in the next house. But when they begin to come back into towns of 5 or 10,000 or smaller communities, that these are historic events in a town of that size, that so-and-so's son has been brought back dead and been buried here, that this would make the county papers and the smaller papers, and eventually something would happen in the country.
It was about a week after his death that his body arrived. It arrived on Sunday night. They went and picked him up on Sunday night. And they found out that he was an open casket. They even stopped by home to tell me that he was back and that I could see him that night.
Nearly all local people, we went to school together and played ball together and, the whole works, sure, knew them all.
I felt like I had been cheated, and I felt like she had been cheated out of her father, and I was scared. I didn't know whether I could make it or not, or whether I could raise a child by myself.
I saw some people beg to live. I saw some people die, and I just questioned myself, really, was this worth all of that? And
my biggest relief is I feel that was his time, it was God's will. I feel that that was his time to go, that God had set for him to go.
It definitely made me, I think, a better person, no question. It made me really realize what life was about.
They were done wrong, all the boys.
So first, we didn't know our ally. Secondly, we knew even less about the enemy. I don't know of anybody, never met anybody who had ever met any of the senior leaders in Hanoi. We knew one or two of them by name, but only by name.
Dien Bien Phu to Xuan Loc, Son Tay to Son Mi, the Red River Delta to Kon Tum. The Vietnamese roll call covers 30 years, and the casualties touch virtually every community. Tet, the Vietnamese New Year, is their Remembrance Day. This is the Vietnamese equivalent of Bardstown. Here, too, the towns and villages have reminders. An estimated 2 million Vietnamese, south and north, soldiers and civilians, died.
Relative to our own population, the North Vietnamese took what for us would have been 10 million killed and continued to sustain the effort. At the same time, I think I overestimated the patience of the American people. And I think the real decision to bring this to an end was not made on college campuses or in the streets, but when people at the grassroots, maybe the first half of 1968, came to the conclusion that if we could not tell them when this struggle was going to be over, we might as well chuck it.
So it is really the fact that went wrong in not having a solid basis of knowledge of the essentials of the enemy, our friends, and ourselves.
I feel the single greatest cause of America's defeat in Vietnam is that we were backing a weak, traditionalist, half-formed Southern regime against a highly motivated and ideologically disciplined regime in the North. That it was really the weaknesses of the South Vietnamese, their inability to pull themselves together, their incompetence, their corruption, their factionalism. The horse we were backing was not a horse which, without a great deal more flogging, was capable of winning that race. I think that was the single biggest reason why, despite the enormous effort that America put into Vietnam, the outcome was so disastrous.
Vietnam is the longest, the most unpopular, the most needless, useless, and most mysterious war in American history.
We did it out of the finest, highest motives. We did it not for any selfish gain. We did it for no territorial expansion. We thought we could help save freedom in the world if we got over there. So our theory was right, but what we thought was this spread of Soviet aggression, in my opinion now, seems very clearly to have been a civil war in Vietnam.
It was obviously a sad experience for the American people. Whether we should have been there or not is a question I don't know. I mean, we, maybe in hindsight, one would say we shouldn't have been there.
To me, the strong feeling that I have now is that the United States should be helpful to its allies all over the world. That's one of our major functions. But we should not get involved, certainly from a standpoint of a military involvement, unless we are very certain that in that particular area, the national security of the United States is at stake.
There's those great differences. Americans just can't get away from the idea that we're big and therefore God must have put his hand on our shoulder and we wouldn't be so rich if we weren't wise, and therefore we must be wise.
I think a lot of Vietnam vets are probably more in tune with what we would call patriotism than our government is. I don't think that I'm the loser. I think my government was the loser in that.
Well, I'm not sure America did lose in Vietnam. I think that the question of the Vietnamese losing in Vietnam was primarily due to the lack of will and desire of the people of South Vietnam to defend their own country.
If we'd had any understanding of Vietnam, we'd never got into that. It was a perfectly asinine and insane undertaking.
I consider my society a loser.
I believe that the real losers were the people of Southeast Asia, the people of Cambodia, the people of Laos.
So I think it was a great tragedy and a sad chapter in American history.
I was there for over a year, and I never developed a love for those people. And maybe I should have, and this is something I need to search for. But I love this country, and my country asked me to go, and that's the reason I went, and willingly. And I may have to do it again, someplace else, who knows.
57,000 American troops died in Vietnam.
Oh, I think they'll always be remembered. I don't think there's any question about that.
We'll never forget it here. We put the monument on the courthouse square, and especially the ones of us who were involved in it, and definitely all the families. It won't be forgotten here. It can't be, It's that simple.
It's nice, for them to remember them, to put something like that up. But, something like that's not going to bring them back. But it's, it's nice of the town to want to remember them.
Well, I remember practically everything as if it was just yesterday. From the time he was a little boy, or baby on up. I'll never forget it.
Bardstown, a decade later. And central Hanoi, where remembrance chimes sound at noon every day.